In this Circuits of the Past video, we'll show you the top 10 forgotten Formula 1 tracks. But first, what do we actually mean by forgotten? Well, by this we mean a Formula 1 circuit that's hosted a Formula 1 Grand Prix at some point in the past, such as maybe a long time ago, and it's now been forgotten by the majority of Formula 1 fans. Recently we've posted a number of quizzes on our social tab to investigate which F1 circuits are the most forgotten. So this order of the top 10 has been completely determined by you. Yeah, you. Number 10, Donington Park. The number 10 forgotten Formula 1 track that you voted for is Donington Park. Donington Park is a race circuit located near Castle Donington in Leicestershire in England. It opened in 1931 and is now the oldest operational circuit in the United Kingdom. From 1971 through to 2006, the Donington Park circuit was owned by businessman and car collector Tom Wheatcroft. Today it's part of the Motorsport Vision Group, run by Formula 1 driver Jonathan Palmer. In the 1930s it hosted the Donington Grand Prix 4 times. However, it was in 1993 that it hosted its one and only Formula 1 Grand Prix, under the name the European Grand Prix. It turned out to be a spectacular rain-affected race, won by Ayrton Senna. In 2008, Donington made an agreement to move the British Grand Prix from Silverstone back to Donington Park. There are even plans to adjust the layout to build a new pit complex on another part of the track. They signed a 10-year deal that would start in 2010. However, as we all know, Donington failed to secure the necessary funding to host the race, and its contract was terminated in 2009. Later that year, Silverstone signed a 17-year deal to host the British Grand Prix from 2010 onwards. Number 9. Circuito di Pescara. Number 9 on the most forgotten Formula 1 tracks that you voted for is Pescara. The Pescara street circuit in Italy was, with its length of 25.6 kilometres or 5.9 miles, the longest Formula 1 circuit ever. The layout contained a combination of two 4-mile-long straights, Jesus Christ, and a twisty section through mountains and villages. Don't tell Herman Tilke. The Pescara circuit was operational from 1924 up to 1961, and there were already Grand Prix races in the 1920s and 1930s held at Pescara beforehand, but they were under the name Coppa Asabo. Giacomo Asabo, a prominent fascist politician, instigated that race in memory of his brother Tito Asabo, a war hero from the First World War. However, because of the connection with the fascist era, the event was renamed after World War II to the Pescara Grand Prix. An interesting thing to know, in 1934, a kind of detour was created to slow down the cars before they entered the start-finish straight. This was actually the first ever artificial chicane put on a race circuit ever. The first real Formula 1 race was actually in 1950, but this one was not counting for the F1 World Championship. So, for this 1950 edition of the Pescara Grand Prix, Enzo Ferrari decided to withdraw his team from the event because he found the circuit too dangerous. In the following years, Pescara hosted several Formula 1 races, with Ferrari included, but only the 1957 edition of the Pescara Grand Prix actually counted towards the Formula 1 Championship, back in those days when non-championship races were all the rage. That was also the last Formula 1 Grand Prix or race at Pescara. When people started to think more about safety in the early 1960s, naturally Pescara was deemed to be too unsuitable and dangerous for racing for all classes and was never used for racing ever again. Number 8. Nivelles-Baulers. The number 8 forgotten Formula 1 track that you voted for is Nivelles. The Nivelles circuit in Belgium opened in 1971 as a safer alternative to the old Spa-Francorchamps. The circuit was designed by Dutchman John Hugenholtz, who also designed tracks like Suzuka, Harama and the stadium section of Hockenheim. However, that track was never actually finished, and the design foresaw a 5.5 kilometre long track, but because they couldn't bring up enough money to buy the necessary land, they built a shorter 3.7 kilometre, 2.3 mile version of it first. The intention was then to expand the circuit later, but this was a huge mistake, because once the circuit was there, the landowners of course wanted some more mulana and cash for their property, and so the Nivelles circuit was never truly finished. Nivelles hosted the Formula 1 Belgian Grand Prix in 1972 and 1974, and both races were won by Emerson Fittipaldi. Sadly, the Nivelles circuit closed after a lot of financial troubles in 1981, and after the closure it was used for illegal racing during the weekends. In 1998, the first work started to change the abandoned racetrack into a business park, and the actual demolition started in 1999. 1998 was also the first time that Hermann Lischmeyer, the founder of this YouTube channel and the website circuitsofthepast.com, visited the abandoned Nivelles circuit. It inspired him to start the Circuits of the Past project in 2003 with a MSN group. Going back in time there, but more about that in our own video, The Circuits of the Past Story. My name is Simon Smith, I just voice over the videos and have my own YouTube channel called High Plane Games if you're interested. Today, the full site of the old Nivelles circuit is now a complete business park, and a part of the track remained all the way up until 2020, but unfortunately there's nothing visible left of the Nivelles circuit today. The only thing that remains to the circuit are some of the roads, which still follow the old track, but it's not for nostalgic reasons, it's more practical unfortunately. This way, the existing drainage system of the circuit can still be used. Number 7. Rouen-les-Essarts. The number 7 forgotten circuit that you voted for is Rouen-les-Essarts. The Rouen-les-Essarts circuit was a street circuit with a permanent pit building and grandstands in the northern France region of Normandy. The shape and layout of the circuit was very similar to that of Spa-Francorchamps. The original version of the circuit was used for the first time in 1950. A lap at Rouen started with a breathtaking descent. The official name of this section was Six Ferreras, but some drivers gave it the nickname Chicken's Lift. Only the brave would take that whole series flat out, while the chickens would lift a little on the throttle. During the years, the layout changed several times. First it was expanded, but then later shortened because of the construction of a new highway. In 1972, a permanent section was built to bypass that section cut off by the new highway. Changes also took place for safety reasons. In 1973, the Six Ferreras became an improvised chicane. Then a year later, that became a permanent chicane to lower the speed for Chicken's Lift. The Rouen-les-Essarts circuit hosted the French Grand Prix in 1952, 57, 62, 64 and 68. During the 1968 Grand Prix, French driver Joe Schlesser had a fatal accident when he lost control of his Honda, overturned and caught fire in the Six Ferreras section. After this accident, Formula 1 never returned back to Rouen. After it lost the French Grand Prix, Circuit Rouen-les-Essarts was used for Formula 2 races up until 1978. Since 1978, the major event was the annual round of the French Formula 3 Championship. And then after the end of the 93 season, the street circuit was found too dangerous for all series and was no longer used. Since then, the buildings have been demolished, but some versions of the track are still drivable, with most of the permanent section being demolished now too. Number 6. Clermont-Ferrand. The number 6 forgotten Formula 1 track that you voted for is Clermont-Ferrand. Now it's today known as the Circuit de Charade. The Clermont-Ferrand circuit was originally a street circuit around an extinct volcano in the Puy-de-Dôme region in France. The 8-kilometre or 5-mile long circuit opened in 1958 and contained a challenging mix of different corners and elevation changes. For that reason, it was nicknamed the French Nürburgring. Just like the real Nürburgring in Germany, Clermont-Ferrand was a very twisty and technical circuit. It also had very fast sections and almost no straights at all. The old Clermont-Ferrand circuit hosted the Formula 1 French Grand Prix 4 times between 1965 and 1972. During the 1972 Grand Prix, today's Red Bull advisor Helmut Marko lost an eye because a stone went through his visor and landed right in his left eye. Because the old Clermont-Ferrand circuit was found to be too dangerous, it lost the French Grand Prix and all the other international races with it too. Until 1988 it was used for national races only, and then the street circuit closed for motorsport. However, the General Council of Puy-de-Dôme recognised that the interest in the circuit would be good for the local economy, so with their financial support they built a new 3.97 kilometre or 2.47 mile long circuit. For the new circuit they used a part of the old street circuit and built a new permanent connection onto it. The new circuit opened in 1989 as a semi-permanent circuit known under the name Circuit de Chirard. Today, Circuit de Chirard is a fully permanent racetrack, with a new road bypassing the old street circuit section to make it fully permanent. Whilst it certainly did lose part of its original layout, it's still a very challenging circuit with many different corners and elevation changes. It certainly still has character. The track is now mainly used for classic events and driving courses. The lost part is still there as a public road, with some of the abandoned sections there too. While we enjoy the images of Herman exploring this abandoned section, I'd like to do a shout out to our supporters on Patreon. Oh yes, hello and thank you. If you want to help Herman to keep the memories of these circuits alive, please register over at patreon.com/circuits of the past. A link can be found down in the description of this video. In exchange for your support, you get access to some special content. Oh yeah, give me that special sauce. You can also make a single donation on paypal.me/circuits of the past. And that link's down in the description too. Herman is always extremely grateful for every contribution because it allows him to continue this, quite frankly, valuable work. Number 5. AVUS. Number 5 in your list of top 10 forgotten tracks from Formula 1 that you voted for is AVUS. The AVUS in Berlin is without doubt one of the most curious racetracks from the past. In fact, it was very much an experimental multiple-lane highway that could also be used as a racetrack. The AVUS opened in 1921 and was one of the fastest circuits in the world. 2 very long straights connected with an artificial loop on both sides. The original AVUS was 19.6 kilometres or 12.1 miles long. The first reconstruction came in 1936 when a new road was planned to the exposition site next to the AVUS. The Nordkurve, German for North Corner, would make way for this new road, but as compensation, a new high-banked Nordkurve was built instead. A similar corner was also planned to replace the South Loop. The works were already started when World War II broke out, and you can still see the remains of the unfinished South Corner today. In 1954 there was a Formula 1 race held at the AVUS, which didn't count for the championship. However, for political reasons, in 1959, 2 years before the Berlin Wall was built, the German Grand Prix was held at AVUS to give people in the Russian occupation zone the opportunity to visit the Grand Prix. Another unique distinction was that the 1959 German Grand Prix is also the only Formula 1 race to ever be driven over 2 heats. For safety reason, the high-banked North Corner, nicknamed the Wall of Death, was then demolished and replaced by a flat corner. No wonder with that name. Through the years, the layout was shortened and chicanes were built, but the AVUS was still a very dangerous track. During the 90s, the AVUS was used for Formula 3 and touring car races, and during the touring car race in 1995, British driver Keith O'Dore died after a crash on the North Corner. The AVUS received increasing criticism. When a new racetrack was built not too far from Berlin, the AVUS was then closed for good after the 1998 season. In 1999, there was one final event to say goodbye to what is frankly one of the most peculiar circuits from the past. Number 4. Montjuich Park. The number 4 most forgotten circuit from Formula 1's calendar that you voted for is Montjuich Park. The Montjuich Street Circuit was located in the Montjuich Park of Barcelona. With its mix of challenging corners, elevations, architecture and natural beauty, it was one of the best street circuits ever created. The 2.36 mile long circuit hosted 4 Formula 1 Spanish Grand Prix between 1969 and 1975. The other years, the Grand Prix was alternating with Jarama. But during the 1975 Grand Prix, German driver Rolf Stommelen crashed after the rear wing of his car broke. Stommelen survived the crash, but 3 marshals and a reporter sadly died. That crash meant the end of Formula 1 races at the Montjuich Park circuit, and up until 1986 it was still in use for motorcycle races. But even then, at the end of that, it was found to be too dangerous for just racing in general, and after the 1986 season, the street circuit was never used again for racing. Today, the street circuit is actually still all there, but as a public road, of course. So if you want to, you can still do a beautiful lap of the Montjuich Park circuit, but just at a considerably lower speed. Number 3. Circuito de Pedralbes. The number 3 forgotten Formula 1 track that you voted for is Pedralbes. The Pedralbes circuit was a very fast street circuit in the Pedralbes region of Barcelona. The first time it was used was in 1946 for the Peñarín Grand Prix. In the early 1950s, it hosted 3 times a Formula 1 Grand Prix. In 1950, the Peñarín Grand Prix was an inaugural Formula 1 race. For this event, the circuit was expanded, and it also changed the driving direction from counterclockwise to clockwise. During the Grand Prix, top speeds of 280 km an hour, or 195 mph if you're in my neck of the woods, were held on the long start-finish straight, which made Pedralbes the fastest city circuit of its time. Saudi may be crying. The 1951 Grand Prix was counted for the Formula 1 Grand Prix Championship, and it was also the first official Formula 1 race to be held in Spain. In 1954, the Spanish Grand Prix came back to Pedralbes after a 2-year absence. Sadly, after a grave accident in the 24 Hour of Le Mans in 1955, which took the lives of more than 80 spectators, races all over the world were cancelling, and that included the Spanish Grand Prix at Pedralbes. As a result of that accident, safety standards of the circuit were increased, which meant that, sadly, street circuits like Pedralbes were never to be used ever again. Number 2. The Riverside International Raceway. Second in the list of the Formula 1 tracks that you voted for is Riverside. The Riverside International Raceway was a permanent road circuit in California in the United States of America, and it was operational from 1957 right the way through to 1989. The track had 6 different layouts, not quite Paul Ricard levels, but we're getting there, because it had 2 ovals and 4 road circuit variants. The longest road course was 5.3 kilometres long, 3.3 miles, and all versions had turn 1 of the oval included. In 1960, Riverside hosted the Formula 1 United States Grand Prix, and it was won by Sir Stirling Moss. It was, though, the only Formula 1 Grand Prix ever to be held at Riverside. In 1983, the track was bought by a new owner. He sold the property on in 1988 to a new developer who wanted to build, of all things, a shopping mall on the location instead. So sadly, there's absolutely nothing left of Riverside International Raceway. It's been forever lost in time, although you could try and replicate it maybe with a shopping trolley. Who knows, maybe an Alpine will do instead. And the number 1 circuit is, and drumroll please, the number 1 forgotten circuit of Formula 1's calendar that you voted for is Circuito da Boavista. Circuito da Boavista was a Formula 1 street circuit in Porto in Portugal. The footage of a lap of the Boavista circuit was filmed by Miguel Santos, who also lives in Porto. He was so friendly and kind enough to make the video available for the Circuits of the Past website and channel. And Miguel has his own YouTube channel too, named orafilms.com. On his channel you can find a full 1 hour 20 minute long documentary about this circuit, and again a link to that can be found in the description. Recommended viewing that one. The Boavista circuit was used for the very first time in 1931. The layout of the very first version of the circuit was super simple. It was simply 2 long straights up and down the Avenida de Boavista, the boulevard that gave the name to the circuit. At both ends of the straights were a hairpin with a radius of 10 metres. This City AVUS version of the Boavista circuit was also used in 1932 and 1933. There were plans to extend the street circuit into a triangular layout which closely resembled the layout of the Reims circuit in France. However, in 1934 there was a huge accident on the street circuit in the nearby city of Espino. It cost the lives of 5 people, and the organisers decided to cancel all racing events for that year. For the next race we have to jump all the way forward to 1950. Most of Europe was in ruins after World War II. However, Portugal wasn't actually involved, and that gave some new fresh opportunities for sporting events in Portugal. In 1950, the layout of the Boavista circuit was finally changed, and it now had a length of 7.775 kilometres or 4.8 miles. The start-finish was now at the harbourfront Esplanada de Rio de Janeiro, and then it continued on the Avenida de Boavista and twisted its way through small neighbourhoods, back round to the start finish. The Boavista in Porto was a real straight circuit, with all the elements of a city like tram lines, curbs, cobblestones, drains, trees, lampposts, pillar boxes and so on. It was almost like a TT race for open wheelers. In 1956, the Automobile Club de Portugal came to the idea to bringing Formula 1 to Portugal. On the 24th of August 1958, Formula 1 finally arrived in Porto. Great names in motorsport competed on the Boavista circuit, such as Stirling Moss, Mike Hawthorne, Jack Brabham, Graham Hill. It also had the first female Formula 1 driver there too, and her name was Maria Teresa de Felipes. The first Portuguese Grand Prix was won by Sir Stirling Moss. Over 100,000 people attended that race according to reports at the time. The first Formula 1 Portuguese Grand Prix also saw an act of sportsmanship by Sir Stirling Moss too. Moss came to the defence of his countryman and title rival Mike Hawthorne, who faced a penalty for having pushed his car against the driving direction after a spin. Moss persuaded the stewards not to disqualify Hawthorne, so he retained his second place and therefore 6 points. Hawthorne then eventually won the Drivers' Championship by 1 single point over Sir Stirling Moss. In 1959 there was a Formula 1 Portuguese Grand Prix again, but this time it was held on the Monsanto Park circuit in the capital of Lisbon. However, in 1960, Formula 1 returned back to the Boavista circuit in Porto. This edition of the Portuguese Grand Prix was a race of attrition, with only 4 cars finishing within 5 laps of the winner Jack Brabham. Accidents, mechanical failures ended the race for future world champions such as John Surtees, Phil Hill, Graham Hill and many others. In the 1960s, the Boavista circuit became outdated and required lots of renovation. Also, the FIA demanded that the tram lines needed to be removed. No one told IndyCar that when they went to Brazil. Since back in the 1960s, trams were the main way of transportation for the population of Porto, this just wasn't an acceptable request for the city council, and that meant that Formula 1 never returned to Porto after 1960. So there you have it! Our top 10 forgotten Formula 1 tracks as voted for by you. What do you think of this list? Any ones that we missed? Let us know down in the comments, and where did your circuit come if you voted for any? Don't forget to check out the other videos of lost and forgotten race circuits over on our YouTube channel. You don't want to miss any of our uploads, so make sure that you subscribe and hit on that notification bell so that you know when the next video is arriving. Don't forget, there's also the website, circuitsofthepast.com too. There you can download a free ebook with 7 abandoned race circuits that you can visit legally. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.